Our next question comes from Chris, and he says, I absolutely agree with your position on discontinuing the use of non-human companion animals, but caring for the ones that already exist. My question is this. What are some steps that we can take towards effecting incremental change on discontinuing the use of non-human companion animals?
Well, let me say, Chris's question actually, he prefaced it with saying a lot of nice things about me that were embarrassing. So,
well, we can read.
Thanks, Chris. I like you too.
We can read these if you want.
But let me say this. It's interesting. I wrote a blog several weeks ago about non-human animals and how we shouldn't bring any more of them into existence. That is a fundamental aspect of my theory. I mean, my view is that if we regard animals as being morally significant, then the next step is not to give them the same legal rights that humans have, because I don't think that legalizing the conflict is the right solution. The right solution is to care for the non-humans that we have now until they die, and we stop bringing any more into existence. The conflicts between humans and animals are ones we create. It is absurd that we bring these animals into existence to be used as resources for us, and then we sit around wringing our hands saying, oh, what are we going to do? What are our moral obligations? That is absurd. We have brought them into existence as means, exclusively as means to our ends, and then we sit around wondering about what our moral obligations to them are. I mean, it's absurd beyond all belief. The right way of dealing with the situation, it seems to me, is if we regard them as being morally significant, we stop using them altogether and we stop bringing them into existence. I wrote, now, of course, that's been my position for some time now, but I wrote a blog recently on animal rights and domesticated non-humans, and I have to say it has touched off a firestorm, because I take the position, which I do, and I do not, I don't deny that I don't think we should bring dogs and cats and companion non-humans into existence anymore either. And let me say this: I have 5 dogs that Anna, Charlton, and I live with, and we adore them. We had 7, 2 died. But that's the maximum number we've had of dogs. We've had 7 dogs.
7, man.
And it's a lot of work, let me tell you.
I know.
And because we take death row dogs, and we take dogs with medical problems. So we have deaf dogs, blind dogs, dogs that have, all sorts of neurological problems and things like that. But there is nobody on the planet who loves dogs more than Anna, Charlton, and I. And if it were up to us, if there were 2 dogs left, and it were up to us whether they were going to continue to breed so that humans could have dogs, the answer is, are you kidding me? Of course not. They shouldn't exist. I love them. Anna loves them. I mean, they are our non-human children, but they shouldn't exist, and we shouldn't bring them into existence. And people have serious problems with that position. As a matter of fact, of all the positions I take, the position that causes the most problems with animal people, I mean, there are 2 things I say that animal people go crazy about. One is when I say, I don't care if you're a vegetarian. I really don't care. Frankly, if you ain't a vegan, don't tell me you're serious about animal rights, because you're not. People get upset when I say that, and I maintain that. If you are an animal rights person and you're not a vegan, then you're not an animal rights person. And if you want to get serious, become a vegan and then talk to me. But if you aren't a vegan, you aren't serious about animal rights, bottom line. And the other position that I take is that we ought not to have any domestic animals. We ought to stop bringing them into existence, and that includes companion animals. And people get very, very, very upset when I say that. And they say, well, but what if we treat them nicely and blah, blah, blah. Well, obviously it's better to treat them nicely than to not treat them nicely. But they're still property.
That's right.
There's still things that we have. I mean, the bottom line is we love our 5 dogs. But if we wanted to keep them all in horrible circumstances and beat them and make them guard dogs and whatever we wanted to do with them, the law would protect that decision too. I mean, the law protects our decision to give them greater than property value, but the law would also protect our decision to treat them only as property. And the response I always get is, well, what if we changed, what if we changed the status of dogs and cats and other companion animals, and they weren't property anymore, and we made them we gave them a legal status similar to the status that we give to human children? And the answer is, well, yeah, that might happen in another 5,000 years, but even then, it would be wrong we ought not to be bringing these animals into existence. They are for their entire lives, unlike human children, who are dependent on us for a period of time before they become independent of us. Non-humans are always dependent on us. They are dependent on us for their entire lives, for when they eat, when they drink, when they go outside. They have to, they have to make sure that when Gary is doing a show with Bob and Jenna, that somebody is making sure that there's water in the bowl.
That's right.
Somebody's making sure that that they can go outside when they want to go outside. They are perpetually dependent. They are for their entire lives dependent on us. They are vulnerable. They live in this weird nether world of, they're not animals. They're not living in the animal world. They're not humans. They're sort of stuck in this sort of weird, uncomfortable situation in which they're not really full members of our world, and they're not members of any other world either, and they're in this perpetual state of dependence and this perpetual state of vulnerability, and I think it is unfair, and I think it's not a good idea. Our 5 dogs, I think, are very happy. But there is no doubt in my mind that we ought not to be bringing these animals into existence and making them our pets. I don't care whether we treat them well or whether we don't treat them well. Obviously, it's better to treat them well, but it doesn't really matter whether we treat them well or not, or whether they're property or not. We've got no business bringing these creatures into existence for our companionship. We have each other for companionship. We have our species for companionship. We've got no business bringing them into our screwed up world. Absolutely not. I mean, there's all these issues that are going on about, I have arguments with people in the animal community who say, what do you do with cats? Do you let them wander? Do you let them go outside where they kill animals, where they get run over, where they get, it's crazy. We ought not to be in this situation, confronting these situations. Do you feed your cat meat? Do you not feed your cat meat? These are problems which we create by bringing these animals into existence. We ought not to be doing that. So I think the response to Chris's question is, let's take care of the ones we've got here. I feel very strongly we've got no business killing the ones that we have brought into existence through our stupidity, through our selfishness. We have no business killing them. But we ought to be sterilizing these animals. No more reproduction. Take care of the animals that we have here, but no more. And what I've been getting since I posted that blog is an endless number of emails from people who are telling me that animals have a right to reproduce. I have to tell you something. I think that is just plain nuts.
I agree.
I do not think that animals have a right to reproduce, and I think that makes no sense whatsoever. Let me give you an example, an analogy that I discuss in Introduction to Animal Rights. Let's assume that we are getting very sophisticated scientifically, sort of, and we are now, we are shortly going to get to a point where we can genetically engineer human animals who have adult strength but the intelligence of 2-year-olds, and we can get them to do all sorts of things, work in all sorts of environmentally hazardous situations that we don't want to have normal people working in. Let's assume that we do something monstrous like that, and we create we create this genetically weird group of people so that we can exploit them. And then let's assume that we come to the conclusion that that's a horrible thing, which it is. This idea that, well, we made a mistake, so we've got to let it, we've got to continue going on and making the mistake. That's sort of like this whole discussion we're having about Iraq right now. We made a horrible mistake, but we've got to continue making the mistake. Indeed, we have to make it worse. That makes no sense to me. If we make a mistake, we acknowledge we make a mistake, and we stop the problem. And if we were to genetically engineer these mentally challenged people who are physically strong, if we were to do something monstrous like that and then recognize it was in fact morally monstrous, the solution is we stop perpetuating the problem. We don't say, oh, well, we brought them into existence, so now there's nothing we can do. We've got to let them reproduce and let them continue to exist. I mean, that is crazy. So the idea that, well, we screwed up, we domesticated animals, so we've got to continue domesticating animals because they've got a right to reproduce, that is absolutely crazy. It is as crazy as saying we made a horrible mistake in Iraq, so let's perpetuate it.
I couldn't agree with you more. I get really frustrated also by the people who defend killing animals in shelters, for example, and I guess I get bothered by that. I mean, for the obvious wrong of it, but also one of our dogs spent a year in a shelter before she came to us, and I think about our dog, and I think, it's very personalizing to me. I think, had our dog been in a kill shelter, she would not be alive, and all these dogs that are being killed, it's solving. I think what we're doing is taking the kind of shortcut out of solving the human problem of creating all of these animals by killing them. And I'm always bothered by animal advocates who defend that killing.
I don't. I mean, this is part of the problem is that animal advocacy is unfortunately very cultish in a lot of ways, and so what you have these very large organizations. You have organizations like PETA that takes the position that trap, neuter, return work is a bad idea, and that we ought to capture all these cats and kill them, or that that we ought to kill every animal in a shelter, and the idea that there are no bad homes in heaven or whatever PETA thinks. But I agree with you completely. It's a humanocentric, hierarchical, and speciesist solution to the problem. We've created the problem. We have brought interest bearers into existence. We now have an obligation a moral obligation to deal fairly with those interest bearers until they die. But we shouldn't bring any more into existence. But I'm a big supporter. I have to tell you something. For the past several years, I've been giving all of my book royalties. I made the decision years ago that I would never make any money doing this. So I did all the legal work I did over the years. I did pro bono, and all of the royalties that I've made from books or any speaking fees I get go to various animal causes. And the thing that I've been promoting over the past several years are no-kill shelters, which I believe very strongly in. Some are better than others,
sure,
and it's very, very difficult. No-kill shelters, that's a difficult job to have. It's
a
difficult thing to do. But I'm a big believer in trap, neuter, return work. I mean, that's why I support Shel Sullivan and the Animal Spirit, because she's out there doing TNR education and her own TNR work. I mean, that's hard work, and particularly when you're doing it in a context where the largest animal organization in the United States, PETA, is busy opposing you and saying you ought to kill all those animals. I mean, that's simply not right. I mean, the idea, whenever you get to a point where you say animal rights means dead animals, you got a problem with the concept.
Absolutely.
And but
yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.